It's a joy to share with you again this morning. It seems very dark up here. For many years, and I think as I stand around and I look at this hall, I've got a lot of memories associated with this hall. And a large part of them have to do with a Holiday Bible Club. We used to run a Holiday Bible Club at this church. In fact, I'm going to go out on a limb and say we still run a Holiday Bible Club. We're just on a bit of a break at the moment. But I vividly remember a Holiday Bible Club every June holiday. And it was a wonderful time. And primary school kids were here, and we'd take the opportunity to have fun, play some games, and ultimately expose kids to the truth of the gospel. And there were a number of things that we did. We sang some songs, and we presented a bit of a message. And one of the things that I vividly remember through 7 years of attending Holiday Bible Club and then numerous years of working it and leading it is memory verses. Memory verses, something that we did, something that I can guarantee you is happening in the Sunday school. It was a very important part of our lives if you grew up in the church, having memory verses. For some reason, I think when we kind of outgrow that stage of childhood, this seems to fade away. We don't learn memory verses anymore. And I think when I was a child in primary school, I never really understood the value of that. I didn't. I knew it was something I had to do. More than that, I was manipulated into doing it because I knew if I recited my memory verses correctly, I'd probably get a chocolate or some sweets. And so I was very good at learning memory verses, but they didn't really mean too much to me. I didn't appreciate really what I was doing. I think I can look back now and I can appreciate that. I can appreciate the fact that I've learned these verses and I've held on to them. And one of the verses, as I was sitting this week and really looking at what to teach on, it popped up. It came up. I know that verse. I know that verse. It's one that I've learned over and over again. You possibly know it well. It's actually two verses. It's the passage of Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 to 6. And you might be familiar with it. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. A familiar passage. We know that passage. But that is our passage for this morning. It's the passage that I want to have a look at. And I think my hope is that we can kind of reinvent or recapture this understanding of having a memory verse, learning these verses that we can hold on to. But we need to kind of understand, why do we have memory verses? What is the purpose of a memory verse? Well, I think very crucially, it's not a verse or a passage that we can simply recite. I think there are people that can do that, and there are many things in our lives where that can be something that we do, not something that we can parrot. It is a verse that we need to know, but it is also a verse or a passage that we need to understand. I think that's the crucial aspect of having a memory verse, because it is something that we can look back on or that we can reflect on that can keep us accountable. A memory verse is something that we should remember with our minds, but also something that we should remember with our hearts. I think that's the crucial thing. And the way that I kind of landed on this understanding is, I was actually chatting to Kit about it right now when I came through this passage, and I looked at this verse and I thought, well, is this the verse to preach on this morning? Is this the verse to present to the rest of the body this morning? I thought, well, people know this verse. We've covered this verse. We've seen this verse. We can recite this verse. And then I started thinking, I know this verse well. I don't have to read it. I can spew it out to you. And then as I was kind of reciting it and reading through it, I realized, why do I know it so well, yet time and time again, I fail to apply it to my life? What is the point? What is the point? It's a memory verse that we need a reminder of constantly. This passage it's a wonderful verse to hold on to because it really gives us such a perfect, compact direction of what the Christian life is. It's a verse of promise that is so freeing. It really is a wonderful thing. And when I look at it, I quickly realize how I should be reminding myself of these words. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. So let's just have a look at this passage and just understand exactly what it is saying so that we can have confidence in knowing it, that it can be something that holds us accountable, something that we can turn back to. It's 2 verses. And they work hand in hand together, and they're broken up into 4 parts. It's quite crucial to see these 4 parts because 3 of these parts are commandments. They are things that we need to do. And then one of these parts, or one element of this passage, is the outcome of being obedient to these commandments. That's how the passage is structured. So what I want to do is I want to start at that 4th point, right at the end of this passage. Look at that end point. Look at that outcome that's promised. And understand that, because really what it does is it lines up quite nicely with what I preached on Proverbs chapter 2 weeks ago. It's this picture of a path or a route, a journey that we are traveling. And understanding that and the challenges of navigating that path accurately, correctly, staying on that path so that we don't get distracted and move off. And so when we look at the second part of verse 6, it presents that idea. It says, he will make straight your paths. It's a promise. It's a promise. It's something that we can hold on to. It's what we want. He will make straight your paths. What a wonderful thing. If we know that life is about traveling along this path, and we have this promise that he will make straight that path, there's great confidence in that. So we are striving for that. It's important to see what this verse is saying and also understand what this verse is not saying, because that becomes crucial. It's not saying that his path is always going to be easy. It's not saying that this path is always going to be short. But what it is saying is something very comforting. It's saying that it will be straight. It will be straight. And the idea that is being presented here is that when we have this path presented to us, it will be very clear. It's the path that we will be able to see. The New Living Translation gives us a nice picture here. It translates it this way. It says, he will show you which path to take. And I think that's a good understanding. There will be a wonderful understanding that that path is the one that we need to go on because it is clear, it is straight, it is prepared. It's prepared for us. We'll see the path, we'll know that's the path, and all the obstacles towards taking that path will be removed. Now this sounds wonderful. Clear direction. Lovely understanding of direction. I think it's presenting something which we should all earnestly desire. That wonderful direction in our lives. And it's not just a direction that we can possibly take, but it's a direction we can have confidence in because it is completely reliable, it's completely trustworthy. That's the aim. That's what we're going for, that third part. But there are some things that we need to do in order to receive that direction. And this is kind of where it all falls in line. Ultimately, to put it in simple terms, the things that we need to do to receive that direction are simply take those directions. It's a little bit of an interesting understanding. We want the best direction. We can get the best direction by simply taking that best direction. And it sounds so easy and so straightforward. Why then is it so hard? Why is it so hard? This is the question we have to ask. And I'm sure that there are ladies sitting here right now who have driven in the car with their husband and they listen to this and they go, it makes perfect sense to me. Makes perfect sense to me. My husband would just take the direction that I give him. We wouldn't get lost, but he doesn't do that. The directions are there. He doesn't do it. I know that I baffle my wife all the time when we go to Builder's Warehouse or to Chamberlain's, because I'm there for a very specific item. I know what that item is. I know what I'm looking for, but it's a big shop, and I don't really know where to find it. And so what do? Well, we walk up and down the aisles, back and forward, and I look in all the different little shelves, and is it this? No, it's not there. It's kind of, I think I know where. No, it's not here. And we just kind of walk up and down, and we get frustrated, and I can't really find this. And then she invariably says that thing. Why don't you just ask someone? Let me tell you, that is a wonderful thing to say and a terrible thing to say. I don't know why I don't ask someone, but I don't want to ask someone. I want to find it myself. Why do I do this? Why? I walk in and I know that if I speak to that person, they can tell me where to find it, I can grab it. Why don't I do that? Well, because I'm arrogant. Because asking for directions from someone is kind of, it requires humility. It requires acknowledgement that maybe I don't actually know best. I've shopped at Chamberlain's a lot. I know where things are. Well, maybe I don't. I'd rather be frustrated and not actually find what I'm looking for than just ask someone for directions. And in a way, this is quite a lot like our lives, particularly the lives of a Christian. Don't we do this all the time? We do. And we do it because of doubt, number one. But I think ultimately we do it because there is arrogance in us. There is arrogance. We know best. We know best. These are the three things that are required in order to receive the direction for our straight path. So the three elements that make up this action of simply taking directions. Number one, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Number two, lean not on your own understanding. There's a nice correlation between the two there. And then the third, in all your ways, acknowledge him. So firstly, trust in the Lord. The Greek word that is used here is batach. And it's a very, very strong word. It really gives this picture or this idea of someone who is stretched out and laying flat on their face. That's the word for trust. And we look at that and we think that's a bit peculiar. That doesn't really seem to indicate trust to me. But what this picture conveys is a person who is in complete dependence of that person that is standing over them. You're lying down flat in front of them saying, I completely depend on you. To what degree? To every degree. Completely. You are the one who tells me when to sit up. You are the one who tells me when to stand. I trust that you are going to do that. It's not even a decision that I am making for myself. I am defenseless and I lie completely before you. They get to direct you. You are in complete submission to that. This is what it means to trust the Lord with all your heart in this context. It is this picture of saying, look, there is nothing that I have, there is nothing that I can do outside of your direction. The second part that we see from this passage just extends this understanding. And it does that by contrasting what we generally do instead of trusting the Lord. So we look at these two and we see them hand in hand. What do we do when we are not batach, when we are not lying face down before the Lord, completely dependent on him? We're leaning on our own understanding. And I think this is the point where we all come unstuck. This is the point where we all come unstuck. Solomon, he hits the nail on the head here. In your life, you are doing one of two things. You are either trusting God for direction, or you're trusting your own understanding for direction. That's it. That's it. And you might say, okay, well, there are some elements where we do need to trust God, but there are also elements where maybe I do have to trust in my own understanding. So what needs to be completely laid before God, and what do I kind of need to take control of myself? Well, I think you've misunderstood it there. It doesn't matter. Batach. Complete submission. There is no element of our life where we should be trusting on our own understanding. And I think that this is really where it becomes so difficult for Christians, because what we do is we tend to break our lives up into compartments and into segments. And there are certain things that we are very good at doing from a biblical perspective. There are certain things where it is very easy to put our trust in God. But there's other parts of our life where we're going, well, this is something that I need to do in my own power. We do this very well. For instance, it might be easy for some of us to trust the Lord for something like protection when we are traveling down to Durban. Something that we do, and a lot of people will pray for protection if they're traveling down to the coast, and that's a good thing. We know that our roads in South Africa are dangerous. We know that the dangers of driving, particularly on long journeys like that, are very high, and it can be somewhat scary. And there are many people who are very good at saying, let's pray for protection before we go. Let's trust the Lord that He is going to get us down to Durban safely. That's a great thing. And if it is something that you're able to do, it's wonderful. Wonderful to have this understanding that it is only through God's providence that I will make it there safely. And so it's a good thing that we do. And I think that some people have that ability to do that. But sometimes you might be the same person who trusts God for protection on the road, yet lies awake in bed at night because you're concerned about your security at home. And so when you hear a noise outside, it keeps you awake, and now you're stressed. And you're stressed because just 2 days ago, you were standing around with your colleagues at work, and they gave you that wonderful advice that we hear so often in South Africa with regards to home security. You don't have to have the best security, you just have to have better security than the guy next door to you. And you've listened to that and you've gone, that's the solution. That's how I stay safe. But now I'm concerned because my neighbor next door has got infrared cameras and he's got electric fence, and all that I have is some lights outside and a precast wall. I need to call Beagle Watch and I need to beef up my security. Why? Because I'm vulnerable. I have not done enough to provide safety for myself and for my family. And we do that. We do that. Why? Because we're relying on our own understanding. I think generally, if I reflect on it, this tends to play out in 3 main areas of our lives. Or maybe these are just 3 main areas that I want to highlight, but I think that in my experience, they're pretty big areas where we struggle in this regard. The first one is finances. The second one is relationships and maintaining relationships and mending relationships. And the third one is our own internal well-being, our own happiness. Where does that come from? What do I need to do to find a bit more joy, or to find a bit more satisfaction, or a bit more contentment? And I think we look at all 3 of these areas, and there are possibly other areas, but I think these 3 are really big ones for us. What do I need to do to ensure that I am earning enough money? I don't want to be rich. I don't want it to be too easy, but I also don't want it to be difficult. I don't want to have to struggle. I want to make sure that I can provide where I need to provide. What do I need to do to ensure that I am mending the relationships that are strained, or I am managing these relationships well, or I am relating to people in a way that they like me so that it doesn't cause conflict? Maybe it comes across as people-pleasing. I'm doing what this person needs me to do. Why? Well, I don't want them to be upset with me. Maybe it's things like internal well-being. How do I find the right job where I can sit at work and I can go, yes, I'm happy. I'm happy because my job is good, because my job is fun. How do I find the right hobbies that keep me fulfilled? How do I ensure that there's no elements of frustration or depression in my life? What programs do I follow to ensure that I am living a structured life that has discipline and order? What can I do to accomplish these things? And these are not, I'm not sitting here and berating you. I'm looking at these and saying these are things that I do all the time. These are things that the world is telling us we need to do. And they're not bad things in and of themselves, but the problem is we do them in our own understanding. And we do. Christians do all the time. And maybe we do it sometimes because we think, well, I don't really want to bother God with something so small. Maybe we do that. Is my little issue of being frustrated with not being too happy with God, is that displeasure? Am I looking at that and going, I'm not happy at work. God provided this job for me, so it's not his problem. He's done his part. I need to do my part now. Maybe that's something that we do. I look and I think that it's something that I certainly do, something that I certainly struggle with. Time and again, we find ourselves under stress or under pressure. We're constantly worrying about very real things. They are real things. But if we stopped and we looked at these real things and we acknowledged what Solomon is telling us here, we truly placed our trust for these matters in the Lord, I can tell you that these things would not be problems anymore. Doesn't mean they'll go away, so don't misunderstand that. It doesn't mean when you're sitting at the end of the month and you're looking and you're saying, the books don't balance. I don't have enough money to meet my expenses, so I'm going to trust in the Lord. It doesn't necessarily mean that automatically you are going to have enough money. That's not the case. This is not some magic wand that we can wave. However, it does mean that that problem is not actually a problem anymore. It's not actually a problem anymore. It's something that we have placed in the right authority. It's something that we are trusting the Lord to deal with it. I think there's a lot of power in that. This is really Jesus' teaching. We look back in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 6, and I'm going to read it for you. It's Matthew chapter 6, verses 25 to 34. This is coming straight from the mouth of Jesus. It says this: Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more valuable than them? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his own lifespan? Why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Therefore, do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat? Just consider that question. That's a serious question. And then understand what Jesus is saying here. Do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat? What shall we drink? What shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after these things. Your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then all these things will be added to you. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day of its own trouble. What a wonderful truth. It's a truth that can make us feel very vulnerable. We don't like to be out of control. We really don't. And we look at this and we think, well, is this telling me that I need to lay aside that control, willingly give it up? Yeah, it is. It is. Very often we don't learn this lesson until it's too late. We think of that person who has that wonderful job, And I'm sure that you can sit here and you can think about that person. You can think about very specific examples of people that have been through this. A wonderful job that pays well, provides for all their needs. And then one day, that job doesn't exist anymore. We saw this in 2020 during a COVID pandemic. Who would have thought that that was going to rock the world? I looked at people that had great amounts of wealth, and almost overnight, it was gone. If your reliance is on what you can do and on your own understanding, you need to be aware that it's a bit futile. How many of you have ever looked at a young person, a teenager or a child, and you've tried to offer advice? And actually, maybe that's not, let me say it more than that. You have stressed the importance of making wise decisions, because in your age and in your experience, you can offer insight that they don't yet have. I found myself doing this all the time, particularly when I was teaching. When I was teaching high school kids, it was a symbol to the fact that I am going to make a very good grumpy old man one day. But I did it all the time. I would sit there and I'd plead with these kids. I'd say, you guys don't even know the pathway that you're going down. Please, I have seen where this ends. I have felt those regrets myself. You don't know what's waiting around the corner. And you see these kids that are starting smoking at 15 years old, or they're playing around, experimenting with drugs. Brian mentioned it last week. We found kids in high school that are watching live war footage of the war going on in Ukraine. They are literally watching people being blown up by hand grenades. They are watching footage of this. And he's saying, guys, you do not realize the damage that you're doing to yourself. Please do not consume this. And we can say that. How many of you have been in that experience where you are pleading with these young people? How many of you can also remember when you were a stupid young teenager, making the same mistakes and thinking that you know best, neglecting the advice of your teachers, neglecting the advice of your parents? Maybe looking back at some of the repercussions of that, some of the realities that has led you to, and saying, oh man, I wish I had not made that decision when I was so unwise. I think we can all do that. This is what we do when we do not trust the Lord, but rather we lean on our own understanding. This is exactly what we do. God, who so perfectly knows better, is telling us to trust him. He's saying, listen, trust me, I know. And his desire is for our benefit. He tells us that in his word. And then he watches us go, yeah, well, okay, but I'm going to kind of attack this in my own way. He's standing there saying, do not experiment with that drug. And we're going, yeah, but I'll be the one who will be okay. I know that other people may get addicted, but I'm going to be the one who's going to be okay because I'm smarter than those other people. That's what we're doing. When we rely on our own strength, we rely on our own understanding instead of trusting the Lord. We cannot do this. I don't know what it might be in your life. I'm sure that there are areas where this is true for you, where you are not fully trusting God. Rather, you are leaning on your own understanding. In my life, there are plenty of ways. And I often have to catch myself and say, hang on a second. All these plans that I'm making, everything I'm putting in place to solve these problems, am I doing it in my own strength, in my own understanding, or am I trusting in God for this? But it needs to stop. The directions are being presented. We need to take them. Trusting in God is recognizing that we are solely propped up by God. And what that means is that if he fails, then we fail utterly. We fail with eternality, we are doomed. That's a scary thought. It's a scary thought. There's no backup plan. But the wonderful thing is that we don't need the backup plan. We don't need it. We are placing our trust in something that is so certain, something that is so absolute, something that is so perfect, something that is never going to fail. Now, with this, there is then the flip side. The person who says, God will keep me safe on the road. He's going to keep me safe when I travel down to Durban. Therefore, I'm going to keep my foot flat to the floor and I'm going to make it to Durban in 3.5 hours. And we get that person. Or, probably more realistically, the countless examples of people who get sick and through claiming faith and trust in God, they reject medical treatment. There's many examples of that. Parents whose children are sick and they choose to reject any, what they would term Western medication. Why? Because, well, God will bring about healing. There are many, many accounts of Jehovah's Witnesses who have died because they are in need of treatment, and because of some of their religious views and their religious understandings, they cannot accept that treatment. But they are rather putting their trust in their God to provide for them. Do any of you know the story of Bob Marley, of how Bob Marley died? Bob Marley had cancer in his toe, almost somewhat a form of skin cancer in his big toe. And the doctors looked at it and they were very confident that if they could amputate that big toe, they would be able to remove the cancer. And because of religious views, Bob Marley at the time was a Rastafari, and he said, no, you can't amputate my body, or you can't amputate parts of my body from a religious perspective. He said, no, you can't do it. It's okay. My God, or whatever his faith was really placed in that time, but my God will provide healing. And so he didn't allow the treatment to take place. And 3 years later, the cancer had spread throughout his body. And Bob Marley died at the age of 36. If he had been willing to take the treatment, he would have survived. But he cited the fact that he was putting his trust in God, and he didn't survive. So the question then is, well, is this the response that we are called to? Is this what it means to trust in God? What do we do when we get sick? Do we reject the Western medication? Well, firstly, I'm not going to say that trusting in the Lord with all our heart is not something that is radical, because it is. It is, and the world will see it that way. It goes against everything that the world is teaching. So there is an element where it will be radical, and there are going to be elements where we have to make decisions that are radical. But I don't necessarily think that these types of responses are correct, because ultimately God isn't looking for our trust so that we can prove some sort of grand gesture or that we can make some sort of big point. That's not really what God is after here. What is he looking for in our trust in him? He is looking for humility, and he is looking for recognition of his greatness. That's what he's looking for. And that's what we see in the third instruction of this passage. It's the first part of verse 6. It says, in all your ways, acknowledge him. That's the key. In all your ways, acknowledge him. And so when we drive down to Durban, we do it in a way that certainly trusts God, but it trusts God by acknowledging his providence and his ability to protect us, but also by acknowledging his graciousness over our lives and the graciousness and the care for the safety of other people that may be on the road as well, and acknowledging our need to respect our civil leaders and obey the law. It's not just about us, not just about us proving that God is better than everyone else and we can get there quicker. He's going to keep us safe. It's about acknowledging God in all his attributes. And so when we are ill and we're in need of treatment, we trust God. We do. We fully trust God that he is capable of providing healing. How? Well, by acknowledging his provision of doctors. Doctors didn't come from the world. Doctors come from the Lord. Acknowledging his provision of doctors and of medical scientists and of scientific breakthroughs and discovery of methods and treating all the way that ailments can be treated, medication. We acknowledge the Lord in everything, not just in what we want to achieve. If we jump down just a little bit in our passage, Proverbs chapter 3, we jump down to verse 34. We get another verse that we know very well. It is one that I'm sure we've come across. We just probably don't know that we've come across this verse. It says, this is Proverbs chapter 3, verse 34. Toward the scorners he is scornful, but to the humble he gives favor. This is the verse that James quotes in James chapter 4, verse 6, and that Peter quotes in 1 Peter 5, verse 5. And so you might know this verse more by this translation, the way that we see it in James chapter 4. It says this: God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. That's the key here. That's the way that we are to trust God, is in humility. In humility. In this complete understanding that there is absolutely nothing in this world that is about us. It's a very difficult thing to do. Very difficult thing to do. But there is nothing in this world that is about us. Every single thing is about God. Everything. He knows best about everything. Therefore, we can trust him wholeheartedly. Let me tell you, if you have an understanding that there is nothing in this world that is about you, then equally it means that there is not a single worry that you can ever have in this world. Why do you worry about something that's got nothing to do with you? It'd be an incredibly freeing thing, and I know that it's not something that we can just do, snap our fingers and do. But it's biblical truth, and it's truth that we can hold on to. If we're concerned about money, or we're concerned about relationships, or we're concerned about our own safety, maybe we're concerned about the future of our country. Maybe we have a look at the election results and we think, well, they didn't really go the way that I had wanted. There's a wonderful opportunity for you to turn around and say, well, what could you have done differently? Nothing. It was completely in God's hand. So what can we do? We can just trust that he knows better. He knows better than us. And we say, well, but I mean, it's not going to lead down the road that I think our country needs. There's the problem. You think. Trust the Lord. Trust the Lord. It may be uncomfortable and it may be difficult, but God knows best. God knows best. Remember that all of these factors, every single one of these factors, is completely and utterly unimportant if it is not a factor that brings humility and that brings acknowledgement of God. That's what Solomon says here. It's completely unimportant unless it is bringing humility and acknowledging God. And thus we can trust God to handle them for us. Before I close this morning, I'm going to harp back to my holiday club days. And I'm going to inform you that this is not just a sermon that I'm preaching today. It's not. It's my very long-winded way of saying we need to learn a memory verse today. That's what we're doing. It's a teaching of a memory verse. And when I was in primary school, and I was very diligent to learn this verse, I was doing it without recognizing its wonderful truth and its wonderful implications. And so I look at this now and I say, how much more should I be diligent to learn and hold on to this verse now? So we're going to learn it, and we're going to hold on to it, we're going to recite it, and we're going to remember that we can rely on it. It's Proverbs 3, verse 5 to 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your path. Let's close in prayer. Oh Lord, we thank you that we can trust you. What a wonderful joy to know that our weaknesses are made wonderful in your great provision and in your strength. We thank you that we can recognize that our pathway is not set straight by our own understandings. And it means that our pathway is not set straight by our own misunderstanding as well. We thank you that you have created this world for your glory, and it is a world that you know perfectly, and it is a world that you hold together perfectly. And so we thank you that we can rely on that. What a wonderful joy it is to know that the Creator, the Sustainer of life, is in control. Lord, my prayer is that we would be people who willingly and in humility cede control, or cede the desire to have control, cede the desire to lean on our own understanding, and rather place everything before you, trusting wholly in your superiority and in your brilliance and in your sufficiency. I pray that we will become people who walk this wonderful straight path that you have presented to us with confidence, and knowing that it is your path, and because of your righteousness, we are not going to go astray from it. We thank you for that. I pray that we will hold on to this verse, this wonderful passage that Solomon has given us, and it will be that which we will use to keep us accountable, to remind us of those times when we fail in this regard and when we do not trust in you. I pray that as a body we would keep each other accountable as well, that we'd be willing to bring our concerns and our struggles before one another so that they can remind us of the wonderful truth of your word. I pray that you would use this church to encourage and to love and to glorify you as a united body, believers who are solely directed towards your love, your grace, and your glory. I pray that you would keep us safe this week as we go out. I pray that we would acknowledge and understand that it is you that keeps us safe in all aspects, and that we may find wonderful, wonderful joy in that. I pray that you will bring us back again next week, that we may continue to love you, may continue to love your body, and encourage us to may continue to learn from what you have to teach us. I pray all this in your great and in your holy name. Amen.